Are you ready for the hot seat?
With a unanimous 9-0 ruling on the recent Supreme Court case, broker liability, how is that going to affect the way that private equity groups perform due diligence in future transactions? To unpack it all, with me today, I've got Alex Rafla, partner from Clarendon Capital. Alex, welcome to the hot seat.
Thank you, Spencer, for having me. Really excited to be here, and obviously a lot going on in the market broadly, and obviously in light of the most recent ruling, a lot of disruption happening. So excited to get into it with you.
And a lot of other good things, including deal announcements, which we'll get to here in a second for you guys. But before we do that, before we heat things up a little bit, why don't you just take 20, 30 seconds and tell our audience a little bit more about Clarendon Capital and the work that you're doing there.
Sure. Thank you for that. So Clarendon Capital, we're a private equity firm focused exclusively on investing in middle market companies connected to the transportation, logistics, and special distribution sectors. We've been doing investment in this space for over 25 years. Our focus is partnering with founders, families, and entrepreneurs to scale enduring platform businesses. So we kind of consider ourselves really growth focused, really trying to take a business that has got a long, good established history, and is really looking for the right investment partner to help take them to the next level, and realize kind of all of the hard work that they have done over those years. So, very founder focused, really wanting to be the first institutional equity in any type of deal, and really experienced having been in this space our entire careers. So, a little bit different than others out there, but very, very much excited about what the future holds for the industry and private equity investing in the future.
Well, I appreciate that, and there's a lot of that I want to unpack, but let me just kind of start here. I had a conversation just this week, and a sizable logistics company. He's just kind of like a lot of folks. They want to know, like, what should I be doing? Who should I be selling to? It's getting very real, very fast, but it was clear a lot of angst about doing a deal with private equity. And I see this quite a bit, and most of it is unfounded. So my question is this: what are the biggest misconceptions that owners in the T&L space have about transacting with private equity groups in general?
Yeah, that's a good question. And look, I think, obviously misconceptions in many ways could be rooted in real examples and facts, right? So, and just like any business, no two businesses are the same, and no two private equity firms are the same in the way they operate. So I think there's a broad misconception out there that private equity, is focused on really going in, using as much leverage to buy a business, cutting as much costs, and then trying to do, a quick flip for as much profit as possible. And I think, although there could be some truth in that for certain private equity firms and for certain strategies, I would say the overwhelming majority of private equity firms are really focused on, buying legacy businesses in typically a lot of kind of old world type of industries, and providing an exit path and an investment path for founders and owners and support to really scale and grow those businesses. So, that is really what private equity is today, in my opinion. While the horror stories still exist, the problem is you never get to hear about the success stories, and there's many more of those that exist out there than some of the misconceptions lead you to believe.
Yeah, and I think that obviously we'll talk about some of the successes that you guys have helped create within our space here in just a moment. But I'm wondering, like, what are some just kind of basics? Because one thing that our firm appreciates about your group, obviously, 25 plus years dedicated to this space. Not every partner is the same. And so, maybe you can provide some tips for folks that as they're, it goes both ways. There's a buyer does diligence on a seller, but simultaneously, the seller should be doing their own diligence on the buyer. So what are some things that you have found that are good questions to help owners determine if a private equity group is a good fit for them?
Yeah, I think the first question is to really understand with data, their track record in the industry or sector that they play in, right? And we're all in the T&L sector here that and so has the buyer invested in this space? And if they have, how have they done with that investment, right? And we're also asking them specifically, how have you handled things when things went wrong, or when things didn't go as planned and as expected? I think some firms who may not have a track record in the space or industry, they may handle things differently when they go and gets wrong, right? They may not have the experience in weathering transportation cycles. They may overlap. They may make decisions on what worked in their businesses in other industries that may not translate well to the logistic transportation. I think the other thing you could do is, ask the private equity firm to introduce you to the other founders and operators of businesses in their space that they've invested in, and really ask them candid questions on, how did it go relative to the expectation, right?
Right.
How did they work with you when things got well? How did they treat you when you had maybe conflicting viewpoints or, differences of opinion? How did you work through that together? We insist upon that for any investment we make. We offer it up to any platform investment opportunity. And even for our add-ons, we offer that up for them as well, to talk to the other add-ons that are platform made, right? And if they want to talk to us, we're happy to talk to them as well. So I would also really want to understand the leverage that the private equity firm is putting on the business. If it's prudent to provide room for investments, enough cushion to weather market cycles or declines in the business. Ultimately, it's about alignment of goals and approach. Get early visibility to the value creation plan and the levers that the private equity firm is underwriting. Be a partner in developing it with the private equity firm and align on that prior to closing and certainly shortly afterwards. And what it's really going to take to execute that. One thing that is not going to be, it's not going to be more of the same, right? Operators should understand that under PE ownership, the goal is to scale faster than you've had before. And that will require a change in mindset and capabilities of your key leaders. They will also likely be running harder for that investment hold period than they probably had one previously. So I think just coming in clear-eyed and understanding what's the incentive structure for private equity, how does that align with what your goals are? And, and ultimately, there will always be differences of opinion, but how do you work through those together, and getting confidence that you could work through those together in the future?
I think those are some nuggets right there. And what I want to emphasize for our group is this is, selling to to private equity or a private equity backed strategic. This is just one of several different exit channels that it's your responsibility as a steward of a transition of ownership to do your research, do your homework, and see if it's a fit. Because like Alex said, it's sometimes it's if the investor expects to run and you don't want to run, or have a team that doesn't want to run, then that's not the private equity group. That's just an alignment question. I mean, that's not like it's something that's bad with private equity. It's just whatever you're going to do, it just needs to be total alignment. And I think that was an excellent call out right there, Alex. So let me back up a little bit. Let's talk about young Alex here, young professional coming into his own, joining, partnering with a great respected firm. But I'm curious, as an investor, what can you point to, like maybe a life experience that has influenced the way that you approach investing today?
Good question. I would say, the first thing, come from a place of honesty and transparency. I think the one thing, there's obviously all the normal course, due diligence, and, all that aspect, right? The financial analysis and all that. But I think ultimately what it comes down to is, being honest, being transparent, being very forthcoming and communicative with the investment owners that you are, or the businesses that you're going to invest in, and make sure that there is alignment, and also be clear around accountability too, right? I think that, and to me, this being a successful private equity investor, especially in the middle market, especially in founder-owned businesses, really requires a high degree of EQ. This is ultimately still, managing relationships, getting alignments, getting people on board to a specific mission, right? And so all of those, what I would call, soft factors are critically important to be successful.
Yeah, that's a good word right there. So let me transition. I teased a little bit about a recent transaction that one of your portfolio companies, Allstate's World Cargo, was involved in just a month ago. This was the Elite Expo transaction. Now, by all accounts, from what I understand, the Allstate's World Cargo investment for you guys has been pretty killer. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and all credit goes to the management team and our terrific CEO Kendra Tanner. It's been a wildly successful investment for Clarendon, as well as all the stakeholders in the company. So it's been great. I think we've 6x the size of the business from a profitability standpoint since our investment in 2020.
Well, it always helps when you're partnering with someone who's getting kind of global recognition for what Kendra's doing and some other things. And so obviously, kudos to her and her leadership of doing that. So tell us about, what's the strategic rationale about the Elite Expo deal? Why does it make sense in terms of, being that exhibition and event logistics? What was appealing about that?
Yeah, look, I think it ties really well with Allstate's core service, right? We focus predominantly in the domestic forwarding market, and really in the time critical, complex, expedited segment of domestic forwarding, right? And so we participate in a variety of end market, right? Whether that be in technology, healthcare, manufacturing, retail. And we did some trade show, but what we found really great about Elite Expo is they 100% exclusively focus in that segment. And they've been a really well-recognized player in that segment. And they provide, in addition to the logistics aspect, some additional value-added services in the exhibition space. So why is the exhibition space attractive from that standpoint? It's time sensitive and high cost of failure make it attractive. You can't miss or be late on a delivery for a trade show. The trade show's over. The customers plan all year and invest a lot of time and money to market their services at these events. It represents one of the key components of their business development, marketing, and sales strategy. And if the booth doesn't show up on time, the show will be over before you can even course correct. So that makes it fit right into how the types of business and the types of solutions we offer at Allstate's to our customers.
So let's back that up, because certainly over the last 24 months, and even I would say even more in the last 6 months, this trend on the freight brokerage side, especially about specialization over commoditization type models. As an investor, why is that specialization important given the other macro challenges that we face, all the disruption, and why is that important?
Yeah, look, I think one, you don't want to be everything to everybody, right? And I typically, things that are complex, hard, right, required, fast delivery, high touch service, white glove service, will demand higher margins, right? And then they tend to have stickier customers. You are less likely to be displaced by a competitor if you're offering good service versus, if it's a more commoditized market where the cost of failure is not high, a customer may leave you for the next lowest cost provider, right? And so those are the reasons these types of businesses are attractive from an investment standpoint. And that's not to say there isn't room for investing in more commoditized businesses. It's just harder to compete against the larger scaled players in those sectors.
To what degree does that affect valuation and structure on the investment side?
Yeah, Look, I think there's a lot of things that drive valuation and structure, which we could get into, but I think ultimately these highly specialized service offerings, right, are going to have a higher margin profile, a better type of growth profile generally. You'll see longer customer tenure, less customer churn. So I think that all plays into the way a private equity firm valuates, or any investor really valuates values companies.
All right, Alex, we're going to play a game now. It's called What's My Business Worth? I'm going to give you 3 bullet points, and you tell someone on the other side of this podcast what their business is worth.
I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to answer that, but we'll do our best.
No, I'm not going to put you through that. But I do want to know this. What do you wish that other business owners in the T&L space, what do you wish they knew about the process, and like what it takes for someone like yourself to invest in their business? What would you wish they knew about how to present themselves more effectively with an investor?
I think that's a great question, Spencer. And I think one thing owners need to understand is it's really tied to the risk reward profile, and how do you make your business less risky from an investor standpoint? And that's really to institutionalize the business, really to mitigate a single point of failure, right? So if the business can't operate without you, that's a single point of failure. If there's high customer concentration or vendor concentration, how can you mitigate that? Because that also represents a single point of failure. Be able to clearly articulate the reasons for how the business performs that is really supported by data. You can't improve what you can't measure. Take a look at the key drivers of the business performance and determine, are we measuring these things today? And if not, how do we start capturing this information to measure them so we can build a plan to improve them, track results, and iterate as needed? So at a high level, it really comes down to the institutionalization aspect and being able to explain and make changes to drive the right type of behavior in your business and be able to measure that so you can do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Probably over the last 6 months, they had a handful of different private equity groups that focus on this space on our show. And it's really interesting. I've heard all of you echo the same thing. You need to understand what's true about your business, and you need to be able to defend it with data. And that's not a small thing at all. And so I think that, what I want our audience to understand, like what we didn't hear in that response from Alex was, it doesn't mean that it has to be, rainbows and butterflies. It just means that it has to be defensible. Whatever it is, defend it with data. And that's is key to making it investable or investment grade. So I think that's a great call out. So tell us a little bit about preferences. You guys are all over. You got, right now you've got, freight brokerage, freight forwarding, last mile delivery, warehousing, e-commerce, logistics, some rail and port services. What are some sectors that are of particular interest to you guys right now, and why?
Yeah, I think I would define it in a little bit of a different way, right? I think we look at the profile of the business and how they behave in the market. I think when we look at the attractive businesses, or at least me personally, it's kind of a two-pronged approach. One, are they providing some sort of niche service offering or a specialized service offering, or participating in an end market that really requires some level of specialization and expertise that really enables them to be effective at competing against the larger scale players, right? Where that's really important to their customer base, and they're not just going to displace them again for the next lowest person or company. I would say number two, even if you are in a more commoditized space or service offering, are you doing it in a more differentiated way, right? Or do you have a differentiated operating model that enables you to effectively compete against some of the larger competitors out there, and have some sort of sustained competitive advantage over time? So that's how I tend to look at, the business opportunities, versus, and look, there's some subsectors of transportation logistics that check those boxes, but, it's more about the business, how they operate, their operating model, versus the specific segment of the industry.
Interesting. All right, I teased this right on the front end about the recent Supreme Court ruling. Obviously, changing the dynamics of broker liability, but not just for brokers. I think there's several things here. So, what are some of your initial observations or takes following that ruling?
Yeah, there's certainly been a lot of discussion and viewpoints that have been out there. My LinkedIn feed is flush with them. And, just to caveat this, we're still conferring with our legal counsels and insurance advisors on some of the implications. But really my view right now is no one knows how this is ultimately going to shake out, other than two things. Insurance rates are certainly going to rise. And number two, there's going to be an increase in litigation. I think some areas to watch are the following. I would expect to be, as I said, much more litigation and lawsuits filed. I think potentially many of those lawsuits will be targeting the larger brokers with the deepest pockets.
Right.
Simply because the more loads you move, the higher number of accidents you are likely to have on an absolute number basis. So, plaintiffs' attorneys want to go after companies that have the deepest pockets. I think those lawsuits will test SOPs to vet carriers. And through those examples, there will presumably be precedent established through case law on what an acceptable carrier qualification standard is. That will eventually trickle down to how insurers view and underwrite the risk based on carrier qualification procedures and audit trails. I would be interested to see how this ruling potentially impacts shippers using asset-based carriers, since the ruling can be interpreted pretty broadly, right? Mm-hmm. Shippers contracting directly with an asset-based carrier, then the duty to ensure that that's a safe carrier presumably falls on the shipper. Could this ruling be extended to them? Could this be a benefit to brokerage, right? Could this lead to a greater increase in share of brokerage of the total trucking market so shippers can have an additional layer of liability protection? On the other hand, right, the FMCSA publishes broker level data. So can this eventually lead to how shippers choose brokers? Could they, if they consistently use a broker who consistently selects unsafe carriers, could this extend to a ship? So there's a lot that will probably move its way through various courts and establish some precedent out there. But right now, it's a lot of unknowns.
Well, I just had an industry colleague email me just a matter of an hour ago, and he said the only undisputed winner in this whole ruling is the Morgan and Morgans of the world. They're the only ones that are, without question, standing to win big in terms of the litigation that follows. So I am interested. I suspect you kind of address this, partially, but, no matter what plays out, that'll take some time. But you and your group and others like you are not going to stop investing. So how will that, how will it shape, the way that you go about diligence? But I'm also interested, to what degree will it affect the sequencing of your diligence? Because some of this stuff, the risk associated with some of this stuff and getting pretty deep into a transaction without visibility around some of these SOPs in terms of carrier selection, that could be pretty dangerous. So how are you thinking about that moving forward?
I think that part of diligence is probably going to move much earlier on in the process. Perhaps it's even pre-LOI, right? Where, you have how is a carrier, how is a broker qualifying their carriers, right? How much of their shipments are moving on unrated carriers, conditionally rated carriers, unsatisfactory safety rating carriers, right? Because that could potentially be a deal killer up front, right? Who knows? And I'm not saying one of the, we all know there's reasons for unrated. Most of the industry has unrated carriers, but, maybe more the latter, the conditionally rated, unsatisfactory rated, that could be a disqualification for an investor or a strategic.
Yeah, it seems to me that no one bats 1,000 on carrier selection, and so the question is, when you have recognized that you had a miss, what did you do to address it, and then what adjustments to the SOP were made, prior, to that discovery. Because I think investors like yourself, I mean, like we see this all the time with like fatality accidents. I mean, some of this is like, it just kind of comes with the territory. And so like there's deep investigation in terms of the process and like, okay, that's some of that. It's the cost of doing business, but are there patterns that suggest that this is predictive of happening multiple times in the future? And so I'll be interested to see how this tightens up safety across the board. And then as a byproduct, I suspect that a lot of folks are going to, create safer operations, but they'll probably de-risk their companies in the process as part of that, which I think is a win for everybody, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's a win for everybody is certainly one viewpoint.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. Well, let me just kind of open it up to you. What is something that you're excited about that you're working on right now? Maybe, new acquisitions, new bolt-on strategies. What's something that you're working on that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, I think we're looking at some other areas across transportation logistics. We're specifically on the reverse logistics side, things that have tailwinds tied to technology and the rapid growth and hyperscale. Right, I think that is a key area. I think another area we're looking at is we're digging further into the specialty distribution space, building products distribution, food distribution. These aren't new industries or new segments, but certainly an area that's part of our mandate that we've more recently started to become more active in. So those are kind of some of the segments we've been digging in, but we're very opportunistic as well. So really, again, as I mentioned, does it meet those kind of that one of those two prongs or both? Is a specialized, niche-y, has a specific end market vertical that's attractive, that requires kind of a specialized player, or is it operating in a differentiated way that really gives them a sustainable competitive advantage?
Perfect. With two questions and a wild card, we'll try to do this quickly. It just has been a fascinating conversation here. So the first one, we talked about Kyndra a little bit, and we talked about like de-risking the business, but some of this, as you pointed out, a lot of this is just relational. You're choosing a partner, like, can I be successful with this person who happens to be a business professional and a business owner? So what are some of the characteristics of the actual person? Because a lot of deal structures that you are involved in, they're going to have some form of roll forward equity. They're going to continue to be an investor and a co-owner moving forward. So as you're partnering with these folks, what are some of the most important characteristics that you have found to be predictive of a good partnership?
Yeah, I think number one, how they treat their own employees is a pretty good predictive, data point on how they will be in leading the business. I think, again, do they have the morals and value systems that align with you, right? How do they talk about their employee? How do their employees talk about them? I think how much of command of the business do they have? Or do they know kind of every nook and cranny and understand and can clearly articulate answers and questions? And I think, private equity professionals sit across the table from many business owners constantly, right? They picked up the ability, for the most part, to be able to read between the lines, and they could suss a lot of that stuff out. And ultimately, it comes down to, is this the person that when I sit across the table from them and we have some sort of disagreement, we could work through that in a constructive manner? And also, is this the person, do they understand what this is going to take to get to that next level, right? And are they on board and they signed up for that? Or are they just, paying it lip service to sell their business?
That's good stuff. All right, one prediction, let's say over the next 5 years, what is a prediction that you have for the overall T&L space over the next 5 years that you can share with us? What's going to happen? What's your crystal ball telling you?
I mean, I don't think it's much of a crystal ball, to be honest with you. I think, I think the AI is obviously going to be a massive disruptor for good and potentially bad in the industry. I think non-asset based providers will continue, like brokerages, will continue to take further share from the overall trucking market. That trend has been ongoing for some time. But nothing particularly prophetic at this point.
I love that. All right, here's a little bit of a wild card question. You're an investor. One of the hot things that a lot of major investors are, everyone's trying to get their hands on sports franchises. So my question to you is, if you had the opportunity to invest in one sports franchise, which would it be and why?
Flag football.
Flag football.
Flag football. I think professional flag football is something that, especially on the women's side of flag football, is one of the fastest growing sports. I think it's one of those things that is going to proliferate through colleges and high schools. It already is in the high school segment, and has a personal relationship because I played football and I have two daughters, and the only way they're going to be playing football is probably flag football. So I think it's one of the hottest growing sports right now. It's in the Olympics. You're seeing commercials. The NFL's pushing it hard, and it's entertaining to watch. So,
spoken like a true father. If the opportunity doesn't exist for your daughters, just buy it, and then just go from there. Hey, listen, Alex, I really appreciate you sharing your insights with us. It's a fascinating time to be a part of M&A in transportation and logistics. That's going to do it for us in the hot seat, sir. We will see you next time.